Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Group Therapy, where we sit down with brand and marketing leaders and we create a space where they can share their unfiltered opinions, hot takes about everything that's happening in the brand and marketing world. My name's Cole, product marketer here at Marq, and I'm going to be your host today. Our special guest is a highly successful brand strategist that has been in marketing at the executive leadership level for over 15 plus years. He's also an accomplished author and also an adjunct instructor at a university right now as well in his free time. We'll say that. And so our special guest is none other than Chris Knudsen. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great, Cole. It's good to be with you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you taking time out of your day, especially during March Madness. I don't know if you're a March Madness fan, but we're probably
I
skipping
am.
out on some good games right now.
Well, my bracket's already melted down, so I'm like, I don't know if I care, right? But it's all right. It's okay.
Hey, I saw the stat. It's like 0.2% of brackets are still hanging on to a thread. So
Yep.
sorry about that unfortunate news, but we'll get into the nitty gritty so that our audience here can hear some of your hot takes and unfiltered opinions. First thing I'd like to do is I'd like to kick it off. For those that don't know, Chris was CMO at a company called Purple, which is actually locally here in Utah. Purple Mattress, for those that are wondering specifically, look them up if you haven't heard of them. But back in 2016, when Chris was the CMO there, they came out with some highly successful video campaigns. One of those campaigns was called the Goldilocks campaign. To date, has over 2 billion views. Would recommend that you go check it out. You can YouTube it right now if you wanted to, or after this episode, look it up. Goldilocks Purple campaign, series of videos. I've been checking them out this week. I saw them back in the day, but they're awesome. So, like I said, they've accumulated over 2 billion views to date. Chris, would love to get your take on that. Thinking about that, your brainchild, what made those videos so successful in your opinion?
Yeah. So it was probably a couple of things. One is it's just compelling storytelling, and I want to say that because it's I can't take full credit for that. There's a good team that was behind this, right? I would think myself as a CMO, my job at the time was to take what I'm going to call a lot of big egos and get in a room to work together. And we were able to do that. And I think a lot of magic came out of that, right? Where it was like, hey, where is the best thing that we can do? But we we did at the time what was like the best practice, which was long form, highly produced, highly entertaining, funny video, and partnered with a couple of different people to get that accomplished, right? But the video follows a very specific model that is extremely effective, whether it's in long form or short form. We can talk about what kind of works today here, but it follows a direct response model, which is starting with a problem, introducing the brand as a solution, talking about all of the benefits positioned against the competition, and then a call to action out the back end, right? And in Goldilocks's, this 5 minute long video, right? It was highly entertaining, but she's getting the point across very visually, which is the other piece of this. The demonstrability of the product was extraordinarily important, right? The purple gel was easy. We could put eggs on it, and we did the raw egg test, and that was like the thing that I think really was the game changer for that campaign, is that visual demonstrability, seeing the product work. Everybody has a problem with their mattress. A lot of people don't like their mattress. They saw this thing. They saw that it was different. And then the humor and the model work extremely well in that video, to the point where when we launched that thing, the strategy was like, you have to ask yourself this question. It's like, well, who sleeps? Everybody sleeps, right? And so then it turns into, okay, who sleeps that can afford $1,000 mattress? Okay, that narrows it down a little bit more, but it's still a really broad audience. So what we did, what our strategy was let's get as many views on this video as cheap as possible, and let's see what happens, right? Now, at the time, that 2016 timeframe when we launched this, sharing was still all the rage on social platforms. Nobody really shares anymore, right? Mm-hmm. But the viral coefficient, that effect of dropping that video, having people see the video, that we were buying those views for super cheap, and then having them hit the share button and send that out to their group of people that follow them, that had like this thermonuclear, it's the only way I know how to describe it. It was a thermonuclear effect, like where it just completely blew up. And right out of the gate, I mean, we were selling $100,000 a day in mattresses. I mean, and we were pulling back. Like we had to be careful because the manufacturing couldn't keep up. I mean, we could have been selling almost nearly $1 million in mattresses a day at launch, right? With that, just that one campaign. But so that it was super important. But at the same time, we had a theory that we were like, hey, if we produced, other types of video, they're less expensive. The Goldilocks video was pretty expensive to produce. If we spent a lot of money, or not a lot of money, and we spent time building compelling messaging and did cheaper video, would that complement the Goldilocks campaign and help us close more deals? And that actually happened as well. So it was like, it really does come down to not your budget so much as it is like your resourcefulness and your ability to build compelling message and tell a really good story. That really is what really counts.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for breaking that down. Super interesting. And fast forward 6-7 years now since then.
Yep.
You're a partner at a company called Stoic Yeti. You're a fractional CMO. You're working with tons of companies, specifically companies in direct to consumer, and you're still around video. How has video adapted over those 6 to 7 years now? Like, what are companies that are still doing video that are being successful with it? What are they doing that other brands aren't?
That's an awesome question. Like that's a great question. And we saw a significant change in the way consumers consume content and the way platforms served up content, video content, in around 2020. So around the time that COVID hit, right? Long form video started to not work really well. And it's because people were looking at, they just didn't want to watch, like, number one, I think they kind of figured out the model, and they figured out like, oh, I'm getting sucked into an ad, right? Like, I don't want to watch a 5-minute ad about, all the things that you've seen stuff about, right? Deodorants and all this other stuff. I don't want to watch a 5-minute ad about that. So the consumers got smart and they figured it out pretty fast. And then that model died. Now, there's a lot of like agencies that still do that type of work, and we just don't see it working, right? Like we are very, I wouldn't say we're anti highly produced, highly expensive type of content. Like we try to make that stuff work. We just don't see it work as well as other things that I'll talk about in a second. But so the good news is that what really does work is much less expensive, and it's much easier to go test the platform. So a good case study in this is Gab Wireless, which is a Utah-based company that they sell a children's device. It's a phone. It's locked down. You can't get any internet, pictures, all that kind of stuff on it. It's built really for like 8 to 12-year-olds where mom and dad don't want their kid being able to have a phone and get on the internet or get explicit pictures or download apps they shouldn't be on, those types of things. And Gab had built really cool, really nice long-form campaigns that were not working in Facebook, Instagram. Like they just weren't working because of these issues, right? What we did was to take all of the really interesting, really good user-generated content, which was mainly in the form of moms telling other moms, like providing a testimonial. I bought this phone for my kid and it's awesome. I love it. They're safe and I can still reach them, right? And we were like, that would make a really good ad. And what we started doing was taking that user-generated content and putting it into that DR model, problem, solution, benefits, closing, right? We started building it and editing that video around that model to 15, 30 seconds max, and then putting that in platform. And immediately this is when we saw Gab actually explode and take off, is when we started to do that. And so we've replicated that model over the last, call it 2.5 years of short form, inexpensive, user-generated content, which has now become, especially in the last year, people have kind of figured this out. Brands have figured out this is really where the market is going. We're just extremely good at buying the media around it and testing it for effectiveness and really understanding from a data standpoint what's working, what isn't working there. And to this day right now, if it's like, hey, I'm looking to launch a product, but I don't want to go spend a bunch of money on a video, absolutely, we totally agree with you. Don't go do that. Start making really solid user-generated content video that, ads that you can put in platform to go sell your product. That's kind of a simplistic, there's nuances to that and things that work and don't work, but the main takeaway or point there is you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a video to get something out into the platform that drives sales for your product. It's just, that's how it works.
Totally. I'd love to unpack that a little bit. Those are great
Mhm,
thoughts, great takes for companies that maybe they're still on the fence, maybe they're not bought
mhm,
into a user-generated content model, maybe they don't wanna go after that, maybe they just don't know how. What's your take
mhm,
for them? What's your playbook, so to speak, of how they could get into getting some of their user-generated content, videos from customers, uh,
mhm,
just videos from maybe paid actors, so to speak? How could they get
mhm.
into that model?
Yeah, so this is a great question because we typically see um, there's this really it's a long hangover is what I call it, right? Where you have brand and especially like CEOs. Like we have a client right now, the CEO does not like this kind of content because he doesn't feel like it's reflective of his brand. But we're building it in such a way that he's now looking at going, oh, okay, I think I see my brand coming out in the story that's being told here by, one of my customers, right? And he's starting to finally kind of see the vision on that. And a lot of that's us, right? Well, where we have to build that content in such a way that they can see it from the brand side that it's beneficial. But brand people hate user generated content. I've never met a brand person that likes it, frankly,
Yeah.
right? And brand people they love to build really pretty, really interesting, really expensive type of content. And then they like to hand that content over to their growth teams internally. And then they get upset when the growth team comes back and says, hey, that's not really working really well. We're like, well, why not? It looks really pretty. It's really awesome. It tells a great story about our product. We spent a lot of money on that. It's your guys' fault that it's not working. And the reality is the way consumers think about brands and the way that they consume content online is they're just not tuned in anymore to highly produced branded content, right? And so brand people are super frustrated about this development, and I think are starting to realize that it's just not working at the executive level. When you're like, hey, look, you don't need to go out and spend $300,000 on video. We can go out and spend, $10,000 on like a lot of user generated content, and we can take that other $290,000 that you would have spent on just production, and we can apply that to ad spend, and we can actually start going out and testing and selling product. The executive level understands it. They're like, oh, I like that model. I like it a lot. But there's a lot of conflict inside of organizations right now where the brand people, it doesn't match up, and we get caught in that crossfire a lot. In fact, I've had 2 phone calls about that this morning where the brand people were like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure about this, because they don't understand what really works in social platforms, and they don't like that type of content, and it's threatening to their jobs. It's threatening to like kind of their environment inside of an organization, right? So it's
Right.
that's typically what we see happening. So there usually has to be an organizational type of shift or a cultural shift where people are like, hey, yeah, actually, let's test this against branded content. Companies right now in the economic environment that we're in, CEOs and founders have no patience for, like zero patience for campaigns and strategies that don't produce results.
Right.
And so that conversation of, yeah, look, you're produced, like, here's the data, right? Your produced content doesn't work. It gets really simple when you pull the data up and the data doesn't lie, and you're like, this isn't exactly working anymore. Let's go try this other campaign. Oh, by the way, it's a fraction of the cost, right? That turns into a lot easier conversation. So brand people are really caught in the spot where they're having a hard time justifying the massive amounts of money that they want to go spend on branded type content. And the CEOs and the founders and the boards are a lot more attuned to, let's go do the cheaper thing that works.
Right. This popped into my head as you were thinking. Obviously, we're talking more from like a brand impact, brand awareness, media buying
Mhm,
perspective. What are your thoughts on professional like customer stories and case studies? Because especially in the world of SaaS, right?
mhm,
uh, Even in direct to consumer, people want to see stories of people that have used it before. Obviously it's a
mhm,
different format for more business to business, but what's your take on more like high production customer stories, that maybe you're not putting paid spend behind,
mhm.
versus just like raw authentic testimonials that you can tell is filmed from a camera or from, a laptop camera. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in SaaS, more produced testimonial type, well, I'm going to call mid funnel, like prove it type content, it's actually important, right? That content certainly has a place in your funnel of how you're converting another business into your product, right, into your software service. For sure, it does, right? In consumer products, again, like that, if we do a highly produced testimonial and people know like that it's highly produced, they can tell that it's highly produced. It does not perform nearly as well as someone who is, doing this with their iPhone and talking
Right.
into the camera. And it just doesn't even remotely convert as well. Again, because they see that testimonial, they see that it's highly produced. They're like, it might be a person, they could be an actor. We have no idea, right?
Sure.
But they're like, it's just not genuine. It's just not
Mhm.
genuine, and it's obviously the brand telling the brand's own story. And consumers, especially in consumer products, don't understand that. High dollar value software as a service, different in that regard. And I think produce content of those, especially if it's case study type content, where it's like, hey, we integrated the SaaS, and here's how it worked, and here's how it fundamentally improved our organization or improved sales or changed this or did whatever. That's very, very usable type of content. But the funnel for marketing and acquisition is very different in B2B than it is in B2C.
Right. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Thinking through the lens of direct to consumer, you know, thinking in my own life, right? Like what clothes have I bought recently? It's been recommendations from my friend. I see them wearing something. I love it. I ask, what brand is that? Where did you get it? How much did it cost? And it's the same thing
Yeah.
online, right? I'm big on TikTok. I get my tips and my tricks and my hacks from everything that I see on my feed. As soon as I see something that's high polished and promoted and sponsored, I typically just skip right over it because I know that they're paying
Mhm.
for it. So I think the authenticity in video is super important. And I love everything that you're sharing here. Aside from video, so taking a step away from that, what other things, just taking it back to your fractional CMO role and also being a partner at Stoic Yeti, as you're working with these other companies outside of video, what other
Mhm.
trends are you seeing specifically in the direct to consumer world or any industries that you're helping companies out from that fractional CMO standpoint?
Yeah, like the new frontier in social is TikTok, and content in TikTok is understanding what works there is still I'm going to call it a work in progress. I mean, we're cracking that thing right now and trying to figure out how that works. But direct response type advertising doesn't work there, so you're
Right.
having to come up with other types of ad concepts to go
Mhm.
test. Um, Connected television is also going to be it is right now. It's already kind of there, but it's going to be, and especially in coming years, much larger than it is. A lot more ad dollars are going to start to go to connected television. You can pixel connected television data, and
Hmm.
then you can utilize third-party data applications like Power BI to examine your Facebook campaigns versus your TV campaigns, for example, right? And we just see really interesting things happening there from a cost perspective, in terms of connected television. Social platforms are expensive right now. Acquisition is expensive in social platforms. That's because all the ad dollars are rushing out of traditional over to digital, which has been the trend for a good decade, right? What's happened in that case is it's made traditional type of advertising a lot more affordable, right? And so Warren Buffett calls this the sloshing bathtub principle, right?
Yep.
Budgets will slosh over here, it'll get expensive, sloshes back. But traditional types of television, like we're talking to a company right now that's doing a linear TV campaign, right? Linear TV is just like they're advertising over cable, they're doing national campaigns. I think it's actually super interesting because it's extremely inexpensive. It's very,
Right.
very cheap. And if you have a higher price point product, I mean, this is how, like, if I'm in a SaaS, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get somebody to call me, right? I
Right.
want them to call me, right? Or I want them to fill out a form and become a lead, and I will call them. But I want to get them on the phone. I got to start talking to them, right? They're not just going to typically hit the buy button right there and spend $100,000 on the buy button. That's just not how it works in SaaS, right? Similar type of issue with product is if you have a product that's let's call it a $5,000 e-bike, right? Your market, like your demographic that's buying that bike, they're going to want to talk to you. Like they want to know you're a real company. They're going to call you about shipping. How easy is it put together? What's the specs on the range? Tell me about the battery. What about financing, right? I need to know about the financing on it, right? So the more expensive the product is, the more important the traditional telephone is to your business, right?
Right.
And we try to impress that on people a lot, especially high dollar value products will lead to higher cart abandonment. And if you've collected their data in the cart abandonment process, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I see that you were going to buy this e-bike and you didn't actually do it. Did you have a question or was there a problem? Oh yeah, I wanted to finance it, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. Okay, great. Now you have them on a phone with a salesperson who can talk them through the process and you can actually close the deal, right? So digital is like, and stuff like TikTok and all that, it's like the fancy shiny thing, but like your email campaigns are probably your highest return on investment or return on ad spend type of activities. If you have a good list, you have gold, right? That you need to be continually like farming, right? And SMS for a lot of products, a lot of services, SMS is extremely important, right? So sometimes marketers kind of think past those things because they're like, wow, what's the cool new whiz bang thing that
Yeah.
I got to show the board or the CEO that I'm doing? Where traditional type of marketing, like, dude, we've seen billboards that are super effective, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, what's that traditional marketing thing that's just driving a high return on the investment on the marketing front and is leading to sales? And if that turns into, you know, a bunch of traditional type of marketing activities and you have like not a lot going on Facebook and Instagram because the data shows you that that's where you need to spend it there, go there, right? That's our I would say our philosophy and how we operate. So we don't think about things just in terms of digital or video. There's a lot of really cool channels, especially today, a lot of cool channels that can be measured that you can go to get, really good results.
Right. No, that's awesome. Thanks for those insights. Last thing, because we're coming up on our 30-minute mark here. Shifting gears a bit, as you're working with these other companies, what, in your opinion, what tends to be the common denominator? What are a lot of these organizations struggling with that they're not paying attention to? You mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
for example, something you just said of where a lot of organizations are ignoring obvious channels that could return, whether it's email, SMS, something that's a gold mine of opportunity. And instead, they're trying to be too trendy. They're trying to show the board, they're trying to show the executive team that they're the person, they understand what's going to work, they're keeping up with the times. What are some other thoughts of yours of where organizations are struggling with right now that they're not paying attention to?
Yeah, organizations, like the biggest struggle that I see internally, especially in larger businesses, is internal brand and creative teams do not mesh well with growth teams.
Hmm.
And that's goes back to the fact that internal brand teams generally don't understand the type of content that's working in social platforms or in YouTube, Google, these types of places. And they're reliant upon their internal creative organization to give them that content to be able to go. And then they're accountable, right? Like the internal growth team's accountable. And when people are showing up going like, well, hey, why isn't this working? Why aren't we seeing like an acceptable return on ad spend? And they're like, well, give me content that actually converts. They just look like they're passing the buck, but it's actually a legitimate excuse, right? Like it's like you have to feed the correct content into your growth team in order to get results. And if your creative team doesn't know how to do that, it's going to cause bad blood. There's going to be this. I had a call about this just this morning, where the creative team and the growth team are like doing this all the time because there's this disconnect between what works and what they want and what they don't want as an organization. So I think that's the biggest challenge. The other challenge too is executive teams, CEOs. I'm going to say particularly founders, because there is a difference between a founder CEO and just a CEO, right? But in particular, right, founder CEOs typically get very much in the way of digital marketing teams' work because they don't usually come from that background, and the ideas that they have about what they think is going to work is usually not what works. And so the best organizations that we work with is where we come in and we have the data and we can show the founding team or the founder CEO, the board even, like, hey, here's what works and what doesn't work, where those people are very receptive to that. And they're like, okay, let's just make sure we don't screw up the brand, but let's get out there and sell it. Those organizations have a lot of success, we see, right? But where the CEO has very definite ideas about what he or she may or may not want, right? And they're unwilling to move based on what the data is telling them is working. I have no patience, no desire. I've fired clients before where I'm like, I can't help you. Like I literally have, because I'm like, I'm banging my head against the wall And like when I show you the data and you gaslight me and tell me that the other thing is actually working, and I know that the data tells me that it isn't, and I'm showing that to you, and you tell me I'm wrong, I have to go do something else, literally, because you're just not worth working with, right? And we have in fact, I'm in the middle of evaluating a client right now on that issue where I'm like, I'm not sure if this is going to work out, like, because you're just unwilling to look at the entire big picture here and really see what's working, what isn't working. So I might be like, that might be a little bit fresh in my head, and I might sound like a little bit obtuse right now, like talking about that, but it is one of those things. Yeah, it's really hard to talk to somebody when they don't have a good understanding and they're looking at the data and you're trying to explain it to them, and then they're telling you that you're wrong, right? That's right. Like, and they because they have a desire to carry the brand or whatever it is to a different, like, call it that, new shiny interesting thing that they want to go do. For us, it's like, hey, you guys go try that. For us, it's like we have a line out the door. We're gonna like probably go to the next guy and see what they want to do. But it's like, good luck. Good luck on your endeavor, and let us know how it goes. Right. So,
right.
Sorry, I went to a weird place there. So,
hey, it's fresh in the mind. We totally get it. I think every marketer.
Group therapy. This is group therapy, right?
That's what this is all about, right? Hot takes, opinions, share what's on your mind.
Right.
Yeah, I totally appreciate this, Chris. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your opinions, all super relatable. To our listeners, I would highly encourage you to follow Chris on LinkedIn, connect with him. If you're looking for an amazing fractional CMO consultant, anyone that needs help with video or with media buying, you name it, Chris is your guy. Follow him on LinkedIn. But Chris, I appreciate this time. Thank you so much. And everyone,
thank you for your time as well. It was great to be on, and it was great to be on, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. And to our listeners, we'll see you on the next episode.